What's up, guys? It's Rick with The Digital Divide. Today I want to talk about next gen, and that's not exclusive to consoles. I mean across the board when it comes to hardware for the upcoming Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S, PlayStation 5, and Nvidia's new chipset that they just recently announced, which completely changes the game. This generation, things are going to change dramatically. Hardware-based ray tracing is going to become standardized across the board, which is insane to me because the rendering cost to do that is so high. It'll be interesting to see the creative direction a lot of developers go to implement that without completely crashing the frame rates. So we're going to go into a bit of a dive on what's coming and what we can expect to see as far as visual fidelity, frame rates, graphical options, and cost for everything. So let's get started. Microsoft just announced the Xbox Series S. This is their entry-level next-generation console. It's priced competitively, and it is the smallest Xbox they've ever made. It looks nice enough, but if you look at the Xbox Series X, which is their flagship box, and you're wondering what the difference is, it's pretty substantial on paper. The Xbox Series X features an 8-core AMD Zen 2 CPU clocked at 3.8 GHz, and the Xbox Series S also carries that same exact processor. So there's no difference. It's the same processor, which is a massive, massive improvement over their current 8-core Jaguar CPU, which is 10 years old at this point at least. GPU-wise, that's where you're going to start to see the biggest difference. The Xbox Series X has an AMD RDNA 2 GPU with 52 CUs clocked at 1.825 GHz. The Series S has only 20 CUs. So that's drastically lower, almost one-third, and also clocked lower. It's at 1.565 gigahertz each CU. So the X has a total of 12.15 teraflops, and the S only has 4 teraflops, which is really low. And when I saw this for the first time, I asked myself, why on earth does this console exist? It didn't make any sense to me, because when I saw this on paper, I'm like, we already have the Xbox One X. The Xbox Series X is only capable of outputting at a maximum of 1440p resolution. It's really a box that is designed to excel between 1080p and 1440p. We already have an Xbox One X, and the Xbox One X specs are, granted, an antiquated 8-core, 2.3 GHz custom AMD Jaguar CPU, which is it's significantly slower than the one in the Series X, but the GPU has 6 teraflops. 6 teraflops versus the 4 in the Xbox Series X. It also has 12 gigabytes of RAM versus the 10 gigabytes of RAM in the Xbox Series S. It also supports resolutions up to 4K instead of 1440p, and we already have this box in our living rooms right now. So why do we need the Series S? I don't get it. So I thought this was a joke at first, and then the price released, and I'm like, wow, this is significantly cheaper than either of the flagship next-gen consoles, and even cheaper than the Xbox One X. Here's a video from Microsoft themselves which will kind of shed some light on why the Series S exists and what it's capable of. And this really clarified things for me, so take a look.
When we started this journey in 2016, we set the goal of bringing transformative gaming experiences to all gamers across the globe. Gamers have different priorities and playstyles, but we all want to have the same great gaming experience with the same catalog of next-generation games that we can play with our friends regardless of which device we choose to play on. To deliver on our ambitions, we knew we needed to build 2 consoles with similar next-gen capabilities at a differentiated price point. By designing 2 consoles in parallel from the very beginning, we can deliver the same core gaming experience while also making it as easy as possible for developers to scale their games across both consoles with minimal effort. This means that Xbox Series S delivers the same incredible next-generation experience and features as Series X, just at a reduced rendering resolution. With that in mind, I'd like to highlight some of the features and performance benefits you can expect from Xbox Series S, our smallest, most affordable, all-digital, next-generation Xbox console. Xbox Series S leverages the same 8-core Zen 2 CPU architecture as the Xbox Series X, running at 3.6 GHz and 3.4 GHz with simultaneous multi-threading enabled. The primary difference between Xbox Series X and S is the GPU. Xbox Series X is designed to deliver a next-generation gaming experience in native 4K at 60 frames per second with support for up to 120 frames per second. Series S is designed to deliver the same great next-gen experience at 1440p, also with support for up to 120 frames a second. It also includes an advanced hardware scaler to upscale your games when you're connected to a 4K TV. Xbox Series S also has full hardware support for AMD's latest RDNA 2 feature set, including hardware-accelerated DirectX ray tracing, mesh shaders, and variable rate shading, the exact same as Xbox Series X. Xbox Series S contains 10 gigs of GDDR6 memory running at 224 gigabytes per second, scaled in line with the target resolution. Both consoles are powered by the Xbox Velocity architecture, which means you can expect the same next-generation benefits from Xbox Series S, including faster load times, consistent and higher frame rates, and new features like Quick Resume. Xbox Series S advances the state-of-the-art even further by adding new innovations such as sampler feedback streaming, only possible on our next-generation consoles. With sampler feedback streaming, Xbox Series S is able to load only the portions of textures required to render the scene, just when they are needed. It allows games to load texture data with a much finer granularity than ever before, resulting in a massive leap in I/O and memory efficiency. The Xbox Velocity architecture works in perfect harmony with our custom SoC to make this possible, including our custom NVMe SSD, dedicated hardware decompression blocks, our new direct storage API, and sampler feedback streaming. This enables, on average, approximately 2.5 times improvement on I/O bandwidth performance and memory utilization beyond the raw hardware specifications. Developers can use this improved efficiency to increase the amount of detail and texture variety, or provide additional resources to other systems such as AI. This means that next-generation games will load much faster, texture quality can be significantly increased, and quick cuts between scenes are now achievable, keeping the player immersed in the game world. Here, you can see how much more quickly games can load on Xbox Series S. The player on Xbox Series S is already enjoying the Outer Worlds, while the player on Xbox One is still waiting for the game to load. This is important not just when players launch a game for the first time, but every time. Whether it's time to load in a new level or restart from a previous checkpoint after a momentary setback, Xbox Series S gets you back in the game faster than ever. With Quick Resume, this is how easy it is to move from one pause game to another and pick up right where you left off. Suspend and Resume made it simple for Xbox One players to put their consoles to sleep and get back into the game later. With Quick Resume, Xbox Series S owners can have multiple games in rotation and easily move among them in a snap. As we said previously, we designed Xbox Series S to target 1440p at 60 frames per second with support for up to 120 frames per second.
So essentially what he's saying is that RDNA 2, which is the technology that the new consoles are going to use, is drastically faster than the previous generation, so you can't compare 1 teraflop from last gen to 1 teraflop using RDNA 2 architecture. It is much more efficient and much faster. keep in mind, guys, there is a 50% performance per watt improvement on RDNA 2 versus RDNA 1, and the last gen consoles weren't even at RDNA 1 level. They were post RDNA. So we're looking at 100 to 150% boost in efficiency and performance for the difference in the generations here. The Jaguar CPU, which is what the PlayStation 4 and current Xbox are based off of, launched back in 2013, so they're coming up on 7-8 years old now. RDNA 2 is brand new. It's much more efficient. It has hardware-based ray tracing on the silicone, and in addition, the new consoles are using GDDR6 memory versus GDDR5 in the previous generation. They come with M.2 SSDs that are custom. They are incredibly fast versus the mechanical drives that the previous generation are using. So they're going to have much higher memory bandwidth than the previous generation. In addition to just being more efficient and faster. These are going to, comparing the two is just night and day. So when you look at the Xbox Series X and you wonder why didn't they just make that the Series S instead of coming out with new hardware, it's because the architecture that it's based off of is incredibly old and it's just not worth carrying to the next generation. Sony is also pushing out two models. They're going to have one model that comes with the 4K Blu-ray player, and then they're going to come out with one that is all digital that does not have the 4K Blu-ray player. The difference, though, in their strategy is that both of the PS5 models are going to be exactly the same when it comes to hardware. They're going to be just as fast. They're going to have the full performance. It's not going to be a stripped-down version of the bigger PS5. They are both going to be equally capable of outputting a native 4K image, whereas the Series X has the super high-end and then one that is lesser. But I will say, though, after watching the video, it seems like the Xbox Series S is going to perform just as well as the Series X. The visual fidelity is going to be identical between the two. The only difference there is that the Xbox Series S is only capable of outputting at a maximum of 1440p. So, say for example, you haven't upgraded to a 4K TV yet. You're just waiting to do that, or you don't care. You can just buy the Xbox Series S and it'll look perfect. It'll look native. It'll be running at a native 1080p to match your TV's resolution. Or if say for example you play your games on a high refresh rate monitor that is running at 1440p, in that case the Series S might also be appealing to you because it's running at your native monitor resolution, so it'll look just as clear to you as someone playing an Xbox Series X in 4K. As long as it's native resolution to the screen that you're playing it on, it's going to look crystal clear and you're not going to be able to tell the difference at all. So the Series X and the Series S, the only main differentiator there is the output resolution, but everything else, all the bells and whistles and the features that the X support, the S will also support. So I think that's really, really interesting here because they're taking very different approaches. So when we talk about both consoles, let's compare what they look like here. We've got the PlayStation 5 on the left and the Xbox Series X on the right. They both have the exact same CPU architecture. It is an 8-core Zen 2 CPU. The difference, though, is that the PS5 has the cores clocked at 3.5 gigahertz, whereas the Xbox Series X is running them at 3.8 gigahertz. So there is a minor boost there. They both feature 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM, which is awesome. They both have custom NVMe SSDs, although the PS5, the SSD in the PS5 is much, much faster than the one in the Series X. It has I/O throughput of 5.5 gigabytes per second raw versus the 2.4 gigabytes per second raw on Xbox Series X, so it's almost double. When it's compressed on the Series X, they can get that up to 4.8 gigabytes per second, which still doesn't total the PS5 because compressed the PS5 can push out 8 to 9 gigabytes per second. So the throughput on the PS5 is nearly double the Xbox Series X, but the Xbox Series X does have more CUs in the GPU. It has 52 GUs versus 36 CUs in the PlayStation 5. Although the 36 CUs in the PlayStation 5 are running at a higher frequency. They're running at 2.2 gigahertz per CU versus the 1.82 CUs on the Xbox Series S. So they're comparable. The PS5 has slightly less, but they're running at a higher frequency, whereas the Xbox Series has slightly more, but they're running at a lower frequency. The Xbox Series X does have a total of 12 teraflops of performance, whereas the PS5 has a total of 10.28 teraflops, so there is a difference of about 1.72 teraflops, which isn't much. They both also feature new audio capabilities. They both have support for ray-traced 3D audio. PlayStation goes a step further. It has the Sony Tempest 3D audio tech, which is proprietary, and based on what developers are saying, it sounds absolutely incredible, so I can't wait to check that out. So both consoles are very, very comparable when it comes to hardware. I think you're going to be hard-pressed to see a difference between the two in real-world performance. And I'm going to throw this up here just for the hell of it, just to give you an idea of how big the PlayStation 5 is comparatively. This is all the previous consoles. You can see that the PS5 is a giant hulking machine. When it comes to controllers, Microsoft is playing it safe. It is essentially the same controller from last generation, but they added the D-pad from the Xbox Elite, although it can't be removed, and they also added a share button, which was ripped directly from the PS4. When it comes to Sony, they are more innovative in this space, I think. They added haptic feedback to the controller so that you can feel resistance on the triggers if you're shooting a gun or pulling an arrow. It still has the touch screen on the front, still has the lights. In addition to that, they added a microphone in the front, which is a better quality than the one in the previous generation, and of course it has the integrated speaker as well and the audio jack. So the next generation of consoles have some pretty impressive specs. For the first time in a long time, I thought to myself, wow, they're catching up to the PC in terms of technology. So what about the almighty PC? Well, at first I thought, wow, consoles are pretty much on par at this point, but then this happened.
The NVIDIA RTX 3080. Now let me tell you about some of the other exciting technologies inside. Turing used G6, the fastest memories at that time. The industry thought that was the limit. For Ampere, we had to push through that limit. Working with Micron, we designed the world's first memories with PAM4 signaling, pulse amplitude modulation, with 4 voltage levels that encode 2 bits of data each, 0001, 1011. Each voltage step is only 250 millivolts. So in the same period of time, G6X can transmit twice as much data as G6. PAM4 is extreme signaling technology, and it's just becoming used in high-speed networking. The Ampere thermal architecture is the first ever flow-through design, working harmoniously with PC chassis cooling system, pulling in cool air from the outside, flowing through the GPU, and pushing hot air straight out the chassis. To allow room for a fan to flow air directly through the module, our engineers architected a super dense PCB design that is 50% smaller than previous, while adding the bigger Ampere GPUs. Ladies and gentlemen, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3080, our new flagship GPU, powered by Ampere, our second generation RTX GPU architecture. Incredible amounts of processing in the shader, RT ray tracing core, and Tensor Core for processing AI. 10 gigabytes of G6X, twice the processing power of 2080, and at the same price, starting at $699. Available September 17th.
Wow, those are some seriously impressive specs. It has 30 shader teraflops of performance, which is triple the speed of the Xbox Series X, and that's not even counting the 58 ray tracing teraflops. This thing, when it comes to ray tracing, is going to be light years ahead of either console in performance. NVIDIA also announced the RTX 3070 model. This one is only going to be $499, and it has 20 shader teraflops. So this has double the performance that the Xbox Series X has, in addition to 40 ray tracing teraflops, and it's the same price as the Xbox Series X. And they also announced a Titan GPU, which is just absurdly powerful. So needless to say that the PC is still on top when it comes to technology. It's still the king of the hill. But with consoles, you get ease of use. You just put in the disc and it works. You don't have to deal with driver installations or updates or crashes or conflicts of any kind. It just works. And for a lot of people, that's good enough. Don't get me wrong, consoles are going to look amazing in next generation, but PCs are always going to look and run slightly better. If it's worth the extra money to you, then these cards are a hell of a deal. Otherwise, stick to consoles. That's going to do it for me today, guys, when it comes to my look at the next generation of hardware coming to us at the end of this year. If you like this video, give me a like. If you didn't, dislike. I would appreciate a sub. And thanks for watching. Bye.